So this video will review how to add and subtract fractions, and I'm going to show two methods for each of these. Method number one is going to be using the number line, and method number two is going to be using a common denominator. So, looking at this first example, the first thing, even if we're not even talking about fractions, is noticing that this is a subtraction problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is change my subtraction problem into an addition problem. I'm going to put parentheses around the number I'm subtracting. I'm going to add the inverse, the additive inverse, which is negative 2/3. So I make this one opposite. Okay. And then I'm leaving the 5 because we always change the number we're subtracting, not the number we're subtracting from. Okay, so that's the start. So now my first method is going to be using a number line. So I'm going to always look for the whole number, and in this case the number is 5. So I'm going to start with 5 here. I'm going to write the number before 5 and write the number after 5. So it's okay that this is not a perfectly scaled number line, okay? So from 0, I would go to 5 because it's positive, and in this case, we're going to go back 2/3. And the way that we do this is if I know I'm going backwards in thirds, I'm going to go back from 5 and break this up into 3 parts. So I need 2 lines because the third line ends up being at that 4. So now it's 3 parts total. And so I'm going to go back from 5, 1, 2 of the thirds. So my answer ends up being right here. And I find my answer by going forward. So from 0, I would go to 4, and then to get to my orange line, I would go 1/3. So the answer is 4 and 1/3. Okay, so that's one method. The other method is to get a common denominator. And so I'm going to rewrite the problem down here as 5 plus negative 2/3. So even if I use common denominator, I'm still changing this to an addition problem. So to get a common denominator, I would first need to know that the denominator of a whole number is 1. And then to get the common denominator of 3, I just need to multiply this by 3. And if I multiply the denominator, then I'm going to multiply the numerator. So what do I end up with? 5 times 3 is 15, 1 times 3 is 3, and then plus negative 2/3. The nice thing about a common denominator is that your answer will also have a common denominator. That's why it's called common. And then all you have to do is what's in the numerator. The numerator just says 15 plus negative 2. And so this would be where you can do scoreboard, or if you know 15 and then add negative 2 is going back 2 steps would be 13/3. The only thing about this method that is a little bit of a pain is you want to be able to know what this would be as a mixed number. So you have to ask yourself, how many groups of 3 fit into 13? And so if I know that 4 groups of 3 fit into 13, there's 1 left over out of the thirds. So the answer becomes 4 and 1/3. We'll try another one. So in this case, it's already an addition problem. And so we can do the number line again. Here's 0. I'm going to go to positive 12, so I want to do 12 here. The next number would be 13, and the number before it would be 11. I know I'm going to go up to 12, but I'm going to go back 3/5. So I got to break up my 1 right here into 5 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this would make the 5th. Okay? Double check by counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. So same thing as before. When I'm at 12, I need to go back 1, 2, 3 of the 5 parts. So it ends here. My final answer becomes, and I'll shade it in yellow, that would get me to 11 and 1, 2 of the fifths. So my answer becomes 11 and 1, 2 of the fifths. Okay? Now the other option is for us to get a common denominator. So I'm going to steal this problem. And move it down to here. All right, so same problem. This time we're going to do a common denominator method. So negative 3/5 plus 12 I could do over 1, and the common denominator would be fifths, so I'd multiply the denominator and numerator by 5. I get 60 over 5. So here, I know my answer has a common denominator of 5, and now I'm just doing the math problem of negative 3 plus 60. And if you still have trouble adding or subtracting your negative values, just use your scoreboard. There's 3 points on the negative team, 60 points on the positive team. The answer will be positive because the positive team is winning, and they are winning by 57 points. So the answer would be positive 57. And then remember, we need to be able to write this as a mixed fraction. And how many 5s go into 57? 11 5s. That would get us to 55, and then 2 fifths. Okay? Example number 3. It's a subtraction problem. So the first thing I'm going to do, parentheses around the number I'm subtracting, and I'm changing this to addition. Adding the additive inverse. Okay, so remember we said 2 methods. In this case, I got to get to negative 6. So negative 6 would be back here. If I'm starting at 0 going to negative 6, this number before negative 6 would be negative 5. And then the integer or number after negative 6 would be negative 7. So make sure you number this correctly. I'm going to go back to negative 6, and then I'm going to keep going 1/3. So I'm going to take the part where I would keep going this way, and I'd break it into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3 parts. And then I'm just going to continue in pink to 1/3 away. And so now I know that my final answer in this case would be negative 6 and 1/3. Okay? Common denominator method. Negative, oopsie, it's still highlighter. Negative 6 plus negative 1/3. Common denominator method says I need a denominator that is common, which will be 3. So multiply this by 3, multiply this by 3. You end up with negative 18 thirds plus negative 1/3. There's my common denominator of 1/3. The math problem I am now answering is negative 18 plus negative 1. So if I look at my scoreboard, I have 18 points on the negative team, and then I have 1 more point on the negative team. There's only points on the negative team, and how many points does the negative team have? 19. And then let's make sure we know how to change this over to a mixed number. How many 3's go into 19? Well, 6 3's go into there. That would get us to 18, and 1/3 would be left over. Okay? There you go. Fractions. I'll do one last example because I know these can be tricky. This one is already addition. Here's my number line. I'm starting at 0, going to negative 4. The number that would be before negative 4 would be negative 3, and the number after negative 4 would be negative 5. In this case, I'm going to start from 0, go to -4, and then I'm going to add on positive 2/7. So I know I'm going to have to turn around and go this direction. So I'm going to break this into 7 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 7th part is at -3. So I need to go back 2 of the 7 parts. That would break us or make us stop right here. Okay? And this one is tricky because when you write or try to get your answer, you start at 0. Here's -3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 7 parts. Okay? And then lastly, if I want to do the same problem and let me just make sure I remember what the problem is, 2/7 plus -4. So 2/7 plus -4. Okay? In this case, common denominator, I would need a common denominator of 7, so I would multiply this by 7 and multiply the numerator by 7, and we end up with 2/7 plus -28 over 7. I know my answer will have a common denominator of 7, and then as I look at my numerator, I know I just need to figure out 2 plus -28. And then we can just use scoreboard. There's 2 points on the positive team, 28 points on the negative team. The negative team is winning by how many points? By -26 points. And then switch over to a mixed number. How many 7s go into 26? 3 of them would get us to 21, and then there's 5 7s left over. Don't forget that the value was negative. The answer is -3 5/7. Okay? All right, which should be the same answer that we had up here. Did I forget to write the negative? Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, there you go.